Mandela effects are popular around the world, not just in America. So today we're checking out a ton of foreign Mandela effects from the places they originated. Let's take a look at the Vitruvian Man, a drawing of a man facing towards you with arms and legs in different positions. Here's my question for you. In this detailed anatomical drawing, how many arms are shown? Many people remember 3 sets of symmetrical arms, but this drawing in fact only has 2 sets of arms. Some believe the empty space on the left and right between the arms and legs was supposedly where that extra set of arms were, but as of now, they've never existed. Others believe that the 3rd set of arms were sticking straight up in the air. There are a few different variations of this supposed memory, but in all cases, there were 3 sets of arms, not 2. Do you remember there being more than this, or is this exactly what you remember?
Let's talk about Japan. Here is an absolutely insane Mandela effect for you. Japan has just discovered 7,000 new unknown islands. Yes, 7,000 new islands that have seemingly come into existence out of nowhere. You heard me correctly, 7,000 new islands. Apparently back in 1987, the Japanese Coast Guard counted up the total islands of Japan. The way the islands were counted was that each had to have a circumference of at least 100 meters, so about 328 feet. The grand total tallied up to 6,852 islands, meaning Japan had less than 7,000 islands. But now, all of those, plus another extra 7,000 islands they just never noticed before, meaning the total amount of islands making up Japan has more than doubled. Now, I'm sure some of these islands might not have previously been counted, or perhaps errors occurred, but 7,000 new ones? 7,000 brand new undiscovered islands? That's just beyond belief. How is that even possible?
Look at this photo. This is the Sydney Opera House in Sydney, Australia. Does something look off to you? How about now? The Sydney Opera House is one of the most photographed buildings in the entire world, with a shape and design that is instantly memorable to anyone who has seen it. So here's where things get weird. Many people online are freaking out over this one, because apparently some believe that the Sydney Opera House was one singular building, with its very iconic and memorable design. But now it is not just one building, not 2 buildings, but 3 buildings. Has the Sydney Opera House always had 3 buildings? Here's another weird detail I found interesting while researching this. After being released from prison, Nelson Mandela, the original Mandela effect himself, visited Australia and addressed the nation on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. Now, I'm not claiming that means anything, but it is pretty cool. Is the Sydney Opera House looking different than how you remember it, or has it always had 3 distinct buildings? Lots of people online are arguing over this one, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. Let's check out a new spelling Mandela effect, this time from the UK. What is the name of this candy? Is it Dib Dab, or is it Dip Dab? I'm not from the UK, but I've heard about this enough times that I figured it's time to ask. This sherbet dip with a strawberry flavored lolly is actually called Dip Dab. Did you get that right? When I was doing research for this one, I actually found a pretty interesting tweet to back up this Mandela effect from 2017. Jacksepticeye, a pretty famous YouTuber, tweeted out, "You ever go to the shop and think, yeah, I'm gonna kill myself with sugar today?" This was followed up with a picture of him dabbing while holding a dip dab. Now, this isn't the crazy part. What's crazy is that another big YouTuber named Amazing Phil jumped in and said, "What? I swear it was called Dib Dab. Mandela effect?" That tweet alone has 13,000 likes. 13,000 people saying, "Huh? Dip Dab? I thought it was Dib Dab." I found that to be pretty amazing. What do you think?
Continuing on our journey through history and its seemingly ever-changing self, next up we have werewolf trials. That's right, over 200 years before the Salem witch trials in America, Europe was having werewolf trials. I asked every single friend I knew about this, and not a single one of them had any idea this was a thing. So I went online, and guess what? Same exact thing. So now I'm throwing it out there for all of you to comment and respond on. To start, obviously there aren't werewolves. But that didn't stop humans from falsely accusing, kidnapping, torturing, and killing other humans because they thought they were werewolves. I'm so glad that hundreds of years later, we don't just single out people today for being different and try to eradicate them and their beliefs. Oh. These trials took place throughout the 15th, 16th, and 17th century. And here's a cause you've probably never heard of before. These trials and horrific life-ending punishments were driven by superstition, religion, politics, and the desire to find scapegoats for the harsh conditions of their time. Sound familiar? Many of the accused were beggars, hermits, foreigners, immigrants, and people that were simply different. Absolutely horrifying stuff, and it's terrifying to me that we still have the same thing going on today. But instead of werewolves, it's fill in the blank.
Here's a fun foreign Mandela effect all the way from Australia. Today we're talking about tiny teddies. These are the Australian equivalent to teddygrams over here in the US. This new Mandela effect is pretty popular and widespread over there, but a lot of people over here in the US have not heard about it. Many people in Australia remember these tiny treats as tiny teddies, but they've never actually been tiny teddies. They are called tiny teddy. Tiny teddy, singular. It was actually pretty fun seeing the perspective of someone in a different country, let's say Australia, compared to the United States and how they were reacting about this. In fact, I found one article where the person was just freaking out. This can't be true. It's tiny teddies. It's not tiny teddy, but as it always goes for the Mandela effect, there was no change. The name wasn't altered. It's simply always been tiny teddy. So if you've ever had tiny teddy before, is this what you remember? Let's talk about Around the World in 80 Days. This famous novel, released in 1872 by Jules Verne, captured the minds of readers the world over. At that time, the idea of traveling across the entire world for most was a near impossibility. But given our modern technology, today the prospect of circumnavigating the globe is no more difficult than surviving 40 hours in a plane. Times have greatly changed. The feat was first accomplished in 1522 by Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan. But the sad reality of his journey was that of the 260 original crewmen, only 18 survived the journey, and it took them 3 years. All of this backstory to reiterate how exciting and thrilling Around the World in 80 Days was. This novel is still read by American students to this day. Due to this Mandela effect should hit a lot of people. So quickly imagine what the characters traveled in this novel. Have you come up with an answer yet? Here is my question. Did the characters of Around the World in 80 Days ever fly in a hot air balloon? Yes or no? In this novel, the main character and his companions used a transcontinental train, a ferry, a steamboat, and even an elephant. But surprisingly enough, they never once used a hot air balloon. Is that what you recall? If you remember a hot air balloon, you aren't alone. This Mandela effect is really confusing because there exist variations of cover art for this book with hot air balloons on them. And it's not just one book, there are dozens of examples of this. Now, this doesn't make any sense considering they never used a hot air balloon. Strangely enough, the hypothetical idea of using a hot air balloon is brought up in the novel, but it's quickly shot down. So what gives? Why in the 1956 film adaptation did they use a hot air balloon? Is it all simply creative liberties, or was the hot air balloon at one point in time used as transportation in Around the World in 80 Days? As always, let me know what you remember and what you believe in the comments below. During the 15th century in feudal Japan, the covert mercenaries known as ninja or shinobi rose to prominence. Using espionage, surprise attacks, and deception, these ninjas fought most of their conflicts in shadow. During the 17th century, after the unification of Japan, the necessity of ninjas began to fade and their legend fell to folklore. Folklore that is still talked about to this day. Ninjas were often poor working class people who were willing to do the less honorable acts for money. So of course over time this profession grew into a lucrative venture. So now that I've covered some of their history, let's get to our Mandela effect question. The shinobi shizoku was the traditional outerwear worn by ninjas. So here's my question. What color did ninjas wear? Was it black? Was it blue? Was it red? Or was it white? Let's remove the two colors too bright to be used in covert actions, and we are left with black and blue. The image of a ninja dressed in all black is prevalent in popular media, but apparently has never existed. Not only that, there is no written evidence for such attire. Now, there is some artwork painted hundreds of years after the fact, but no actual evidence of black clothing. Ninjas wore blue. The reasoning goes as follows. Wearing black at night creates an outline around your body, because the night sky is never truly black. This contrast makes you stand out and makes you more visible. Dark blue, on the other hand, is much more effective. Besides simply wearing dark blue shinobi shizoku at night, ninjas often wore plain clothes to blend in. Peasant, merchant, priest, and low-level samurais were perfect disguises for walking around in the countryside discreetly to spy or assassinate. So what do you think about all this? Did you believe that ninja wore black? And if you did, you're not alone. Apparently, it's a misconception that has existed for hundreds of years. Perhaps it comes from artists taking creative liberties over the years, or perhaps it's the Mandela effect. As always, I'll let you decide. I never thought I'd start a segment off like this before, but let's talk about torture devices of the Middle Ages. Specifically, I want to talk about the Iron Maiden. Iron Maidens are one of the most notorious torture devices ever. It's an upright iron casket with outward opening doors that on the insides of those doors were covered in spikes.
The idea is that a prisoner would be put inside of one of these, and then the iron door or doors would be shut. The spikes were short and positioned in a way that the victim wouldn't die quickly, but would rather bleed out over time. Absolutely brutal way to go. But what if I told you that this wasn't a real thing? And I mean it's real as in an object of fiction, but it was never used on anyone. And it didn't actually exist before the 19th century. The Iron Maiden is apparently considered a myth now. These contraptions apparently started popping up in historical museums, and that alone was enough to propagate this concept that they were real. Does that sound right to you? Apparently most torture in the Middle Ages was just being bound with rope. The idea of getting a confession before execution was to make sure that they didn't go to hell. But the weird misconception / Mandela effect / I don't even know what's going on anymore doesn't end there. Apparently many of the torture devices we all grew up learning about were fake. The Pearl of Anguish? Fake. The Iron Maiden? Fake. The Brazen Bull? Fake. What even is real anymore? How can so many of us grow up believing one thing, only for it to not only be untrue, but to also have never been true at all? And what's troubling to me is it feels like history is just constantly changing, all the time now. I feel like every once in a while you'd learn something, you're like, wow, I didn't know that, or wow, I used to think that, but it's actually this, but it seems like it's happening so often now, all the time. So what did you learn growing up about these things? And does what you remember learning match this seemingly new reality? Let me know.
The massive ancient pyramids of Egypt, some of the greatest wonders left in the world, known worldwide for their vast size, striking design, intricate construction, immense complexity, and overall wonder. The pyramids of Giza have inspired countless minds. When one thinks of the Great Pyramids, what else comes to mind? Ancient gods, pharaohs, hieroglyphics, and especially mummies. As mainstream Egyptologists and archaeologists understand the pyramids now, they claim that the pyramids were massive tombs to house great pharaohs after death. But what if I were to tell you that within the Great Pyramids of the Giza Pyramid Complex, no mummies or mummified pharaohs have ever been found? That's right, not a single ancient body has ever been discovered inside the pyramids. In fact, all of the mummies, sarcophagi, and pharaohs ever discovered have been found in locations near the pyramids, but never inside them. Places such as the Valley of the Kings, hidden royal tombs, and cemeteries located all around the pyramids. The belief that pyramids were tombs are largely based on speculation with no hard evidence or bodies to support that claim. For example, one of the most well-known pharaohs was the young Tutankhamun, also known as King Tut. Where was his sarcophagus discovered? In the Valley of the Kings. So what about Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten? Where was he buried? Well, which archaeological site he's buried in is still debated to this day, but it's either the royal tomb of Akhenaten in Amarna or the Valley of the Kings. Well, what about Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great, or Osmandius in Greek? Where was he buried? The East, Valley of the Kings. What about Amenhotep III, also known as Amenhotep the Magnificent? Well, you guessed it, the Valley of the Kings, this time in the Western Valley. So many famous pharaohs, and not a single one of them were ever laid to rest in the Great Pyramids of Giza. I find that not just fascinating, but absolutely astonishing. Not a single body, not a single mummy, not a single pharaoh, nothing. So what do you remember learning? Were mummified pharaohs and sarcophagi laid to rest in the Great Pyramids, or were they always empty? Is this another case of the Mandela effect, or is this something else entirely? What do you think? Has history changed before our very eyes, or is this exactly what you remember? Here's something that I find really cool about the Mandela effect. Once a topic has been affected by it, people tend to look closer into whatever that topic is. And when things are given a little more scrutiny, oftentimes even more Mandela effects are discovered within it. And this next one is no different. When you think of the pyramids, what do you see? Mummies, tombs, pharaohs. What about hieroglyphs? Hieroglyphics written all across the walls. Well, it turns out there are no hieroglyphs in any of the pyramids of Giza. That's right, there are no hieroglyphs anywhere in the pyramids of Giza. There are in fact no hieroglyphs, no writings, no treasures, and no mummies ever found in the pyramids of Giza. This has apparently always been the case. What's next? There's 4 pyramids of Giza, there's 5 pyramids. Who knows? Can't wait to find out though. Here's a fascinating Mandela effect from Brazil about the anime Dragon Ball Z and that dreadful day of September 11th, 2001. I know some people in my audience aren't old enough to remember this because they weren't alive. But if you were alive and you do you remember where you were for September 11th, 2001? I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, I remember who was there with me when that day happened. Our teacher got a phone call on the telephone in the classroom and then turned on the TV, and all of us watched 9/11 happen on the news. The first tower of the Twin Towers had already been hit, and we didn't know the second one was going to be hit. But there we were, 7th graders in math class, staring in absolute horror. And to this day, I don't know why anyone thought it was a good idea to show this to children, but they did, and I've always been fascinated by that day. In Brazil, there are many, and I mean many reports and accounts of people watching Dragon Ball Z live when 9/11 happened. Apparently, it cut away from whatever episode of Dragon Ball Z was playing at the time to show what was going down in New York City. And like me with my 7th grade memories, this is the account of thousands of young Brazilians. I mean, I guess they're not young anymore, but at the time they were young. But here's the thing, and this is the Mandela effect. Dragon Ball Z was not playing at that time, anywhere in Brazil. People have scoured the internet to reconcile their memories, to make this make sense. They've watched through video recordings of that day, they dug through broadcast records of that time, and it didn't happen. Somehow Dragon Ball Z wasn't playing when 9/11 happened in Brazil, even though thousands of people remember it that way. How crazy is that? So if you're in my audience and you're Brazilian, or perhaps you lived in Brazil at that time, what do you remember?
Continuing with our unintentional recent tradition of pointing out Mandela effects from the UK, today we're looking at the Blue Ribbon Candy Bar, or at least that's what so many people seem to believe it's called. This brand started back in 1936 and was acquired by Nestle in 1988. Recently though, after 80 years of it being on store shelves, only now have some people started to realize it wasn't actually called Blue Ribbon, it's actually called Blue Riband, R-I-B-A-N-D. Looking deeper into this Mandela effect, I've found countless others online who remember this brand being ribbon instead of riband. Not only that, I found multiple articles talking about this supposed change. Going back further, I even found a TV show talking about reactions to Blue Ribbon actually being called Blue Riband. Check this out.
Social media was set alight by people baffled and upset that a biscuit they'd always thought was called Blue Ribbon.
Yeah. Is it und, isn't it? It's the dut on the end, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called Blue Riband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did people think it was called Blue Ribbon?
I have no idea, because it's been called that since 1936. Consumers were so deeply traumatized.
You saw people crying in the streets.
Yeah. They went online to vent their horror. Yeah, of course they did. Becca wrote, "I've been lied to all my life." And Terry agreed with riband. That'll take some explaining. Okay, I'm going to do a little experiment with you now, which I know you'll love. So what I'd like you to do in this little experiment is write down the name as it appears on the label of a Kit Kat.
Okay. But I've written Kit Kat because I'm assuming that's how it's written on the label.
Right, Robert, let's see yours.
Just says Kit Kat, really?
Yeah, it's a circle with Kit Kat on it.
Yeah.
Right.
I've put a hyphen in it.
Right,
Oh, it could be a hyphen, yeah, it could be.
It hasn't got a hyphen. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, no hyphens over here.
Amazing.
Perhaps all this confusion is because of how it's been pronounced or mispronounced over the years. Or possibly all of these people simply weren't paying attention to the name of the bar. That, or it's a Mandela effect. Let me know.
The Mona Lisa, the world-famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci, is no stranger to the Mandela effect. Previously, people have argued over whether or not she is smiling, smirking, or just giving a straight face, a debate that still rages on to this day. But that's not the argument that's going to be presented today. Today we're talking about a growing group of people who have made the claim that Lisa now has a thin, semi-transparent black veil over her head and hair that she previously did not. Take a look at this and tell me what you think. What do you remember? Has the black veil always been there? Or are these people mistaken? Or has this strange new addition to history crept in without anyone noticing? Here's an outlandish theory that someone proposed that seems entirely within the realm of possibility. Perhaps the Mona Lisa was stolen many years ago and replaced with a finely crafted fake. If that actually was the case, I could understand a few differences here and there. I mean, the cost of insurance for the Mona Lisa today is valued at $870 million. That's a valuable piece of history. Now, I'm no art expert, so definitely don't take my opinion as fact. But of all the times that I've viewed this painting, I've never once noticed this black veil, let alone how detailed it is. I mean, look at the edges on the left side of her hair. It's exquisitely detailed. One interesting fact from this time period is that a black veil typically signified a pregnant woman or a woman who just gave birth. A very modern theory regarding the model for the Mona Lisa is that she was indeed pregnant, but amazingly enough, this is not the first time that the Mona Lisa was pregnant theory has been floated. In 1959, a British doctor, Kenneth D. Keel, published a paper in the Journal of History and Medicine and Allied Sciences, insisting that the woman in the world's most famous painting had a puffy neck caused by an enlarged thyroid gland, a sure sign that she was pregnant. What do you think about all this? Where does sauerkraut originate from? Is it Germany or is it China? Tough question, right? The common belief that sauerkraut, a German word, obviously comes from Germany. Nope, not anymore. Sauerkraut now originates from China. Okay. Historians claim that sauerkraut was brought to Europe by Genghis Khan himself, but others claim that it originally came from China. So whether it's China or Mongolia, most believe it's China. As strange as this is for me, what do you think? Does that feel right to you? As always, let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about potato chips, or as they like to call them, crisps. Specifically, Walker's Crisps. There is a long-established brand of chips over there called Walker's Crisps. Specifically, a salt and vinegar variation in a green package and a cheese and onion variation in a blue package. That's how they are sold to this day, but the vast majority of people believe those colors and flavors switched around. What so many seem to remember is salt and vinegar in blue and cheese and onion in green. It sounds weird at first, but this has become a pretty big deal. This would be the American equivalent of the Doritos red and blue bags switching flavors and colors. It's totally strange and obviously wrong. Not only that, there are countless personal experiences of people talking about these chips and the color switch. Here's some examples. And no, I'm not going to use a British accent. Used to buy the blue salt and vinegars Walkers religiously because salt and vinegar is my jam. One day I opened up a blue pack, took a bite, and it was cheese and onion. 44 years old from the UK. I too vividly remember this color swap. This is beyond freaky. I have a specific memory of buying a pack of Walker's Crisps in a vending machine as a youngster, and without thinking, I picked the green ones as I love cheese and onion. I was devastated when I got salt and vinegar. The quotes go on and on and on. People remember these colors being flipped. So what does the company behind them say? Couldn't it simply be that the colors were flipped at one point and that's the explanation? Case closed? Well, Vice did an entire article on this crazy mystery called The Walker's Crisps Conspiracy that has people convinced we're in an alternate reality. That's a mouthful of a title, geez. In this article, they delve deep into the mystery and show off this incredible gaslighting FAQ section of the Walker's website. Question: why did you change your packaging for salt and vinegar and cheese and onion so they're in the wrong colors? Answer: contrary to popular belief, Walker's cheese and onion have always been in blue packets, and salt and vinegar have always been in green packets. We don't have a plan to change this, as it's signature to our brand. Undeterred by this response, the writer of this article actually tracked down a longtime Walker's representative. And this representative actually remembers there being a switch, but can't remember when it was, and can't find anything about it, just like everyone else. Like, you can't make this stuff up. Even the chip representative remembers them switching, but the company denies it? So then people turn to Google and other search engines, and guess what? There's no evidence of the color switch. Tons of people talking about it online, but no proof or residue. The author of this article even reached out to Google, and Google denies ever changing or deleting anything relating to Walker's Crisps. There have even been multiple polls done regarding these chips, and like I said earlier, the majority of people believe a switch happened. But Walker's Crisps denies it, and there is no evidence that it ever happened outside of the thousands and thousands of recorded memories. What do you think? I ask you about skyscrapers, as in massive towers that seemingly touch the clouds. What time period do you think of? You're probably thinking modern times, maybe the last 100 years or so. I'm pretty sure you aren't thinking of the Middle Ages. Take a look at this drawing. This is a rendition of the town of Bologna, Italy, during the Middle Ages, and look at how it's filled with skyscrapers. Just look at all those details. While these massive towers don't compare to today's insane engineering feats, it's still absurdly impressive that something like this actually existed over 800 years ago. Between the 12th and 13th century, at least 3 Italian cities were dominated by these massive stone towers, some even reaching 97 meters, or 318 feet. The cities were Florence, Bologna, and San Gimignano. As the story goes now, these towers were built by rich merchants who wanted to display their wealth and power within these cities. But the actual reason has been lost to time. Some say they were defensive structures, others claim that they were hideouts during times of conflict. We really don't know. The construction of these massive skyscrapers took between 3 and 10 years to complete, and the total number of towers that existed back then has been debated for years.
We have one historian estimating that there were over 180 towers based on real estate records. But the common number that is thrown around is between 80 and 100 towers. By the 13th century, most of these towers were destroyed or collapsed. Although there are still many that still stand to this day, and plenty of pictures of them. They're pretty amazing. The remaining towers became repurposed as prisons, residential buildings, or shops. Today, fewer than 20 of these towers still remain, at least in Bologna, Italy. But here's the weird thing. This isn't the first time that Bologna, Italy has had a Mandela effect. In fact, this is the second major one to come from that town. Pretty interesting, right? Here's that effect. The date is August 2nd, 1980. Today is the date of the Bologna massacre. On this dreadful morning, a time bomb placed inside of an unattended suitcase was left in the waiting room at the Bologna Centrale railway station. When it went off, over 200 people were injured and over 85 people died. The blast collapsed the roof of the waiting room, destroyed most of the main buildings, and even hit a train waiting nearby for boarding. This attack is known as the worst atrocity in Italy since World War II. Now, I bring up this awful tragedy because there is a fascinating Mandela effect attached to it. There is a giant clock on the wall of the Bologna station that stopped working at the exact moment of the attack. On the clock, it reads 10:25 a.m. Now here is where things get weird. Was the clock left at 10:25 a.m. in remembrance of this tragedy, or was it repaired right away? Thousands of people have gone on record as remembering the clock being left at 10:25 a.m. permanently. Newspapers talked about this and even photographs were taken. But now it turns out that it was repaired right away. And for 15 years the clock worked perfectly. In 1995, when it finally broke again, the clock was permanently set to 10:25 a.m. in remembrance of what had happened prior. So here's where things get weirder. An unbelievable number of people remember this clock being stopped all of those 15 years. So many, in fact, that scientific investigations were done to get to the bottom of this massive case of misremembering. Now you're up to date on Bologna's two big Mandela effects. Oftentimes, where there's one Mandela effect about a certain place or topic, more are likely to follow. So going forward, keep your eyes on Bologna, Italy. I'm sure something else is going to pop up, and it usually doesn't take that long. Let's talk about the Mandela effect that started it all. In fact, this phenomenon is literally named after it. When did Nelson Mandela die? Funny enough, I've never actually talked about this specific example before, so I'm excited to finally cover it. I mean, this is the complete edition of every historical Mandela effect I've ever covered, so there really isn't a more perfect place to talk about it. This Mandela effect revolves around Nelson Mandela, the South African anti-apartheid leader who eventually became president of South Africa. Today, history tells us that Nelson Mandela died in 2013 at the age of 95. But here's where things get strange. A large number of people actually remember Nelson Mandela dying decades earlier, specifically in the 1980s while he was still in prison. And these memories aren't vague. People claim they remember news coverage of his death, and even speeches given at his funeral. Some remember learning about it in school. Others remember discussions about the political consequences of his death while he was in prison. But according to recorded history, none of that happened. Apparently, all of these people somehow fabricated entire realities that didn't exist. This is actually what created the term the Mandela effect, where large groups of people remember things one way, only for them to actually have gone another way. And a reverse Mandela effect is when something that no one remembers happening actually happened. In fact, the Mandela effect I'm covering after this is an example of that. As it goes now, Nelson Mandela was actually released from prison in 1990, after spending 27 years behind bars. A few years later, in 1994, he became the first black president of South Africa after the end of apartheid. And then he lived for nearly 2 more decades before passing away in 2013. So how did so many people end up remembering a completely different history? Well, that's the mystery of it all. In fact, I made a gigantic video covering all the explanations, called What Caused the Mandela Effect, Complete Edition. Links for that are in the description. Check it out after this video. It'll blow your mind. You see, it's one thing for a single person to misremember something, but when thousands of people misremember the same event in the exact same way, across multiple countries and languages, yeah, something weird is going on. It starts to feel a lot harder to explain. And whatever it turns out that the explanation is, this example of Nelson Mandela dying in the 1980s remains one of the most famous and mysterious memory discrepancies people talk about today. I mean, it literally created the Mandela effect because it was so popular and unsettling. And it all started with one simple question. Do you remember Nelson Mandela dying in the 1980s or in 2013?